The first time Princess Talia saw him, she knew he was different. Not just because of his unusual eyes, amber with flecks of silver that seemed to reflect light that wasn't there, but because of the way he carried himself. Even in chains, even with the voice suppression collar tight around his throat, he stood tall among the other exotic creatures and unfortunate souls being sold at Antheria's black market. This one, she said, pointing with the casual entitlement of someone who had never been denied anything in her 18 years. Her guards exchanged nervous glances. "Your Highness," Commander Vex began, his voice low, "Lord Claris would not approve of this particular pet. There are rumors this one is dangerous. Perhaps the six-legged feline from the Cressida system would be more suitable for someone of your standing." Talia's eyes narrowed, a perfect imitation of her father's disapproving glare. "I don't recall asking for your opinion, Commander. This is my name-day gift, and I shall choose as I please." The merchant, a greasy man with cybernetic enhancements crawling up his neck like metallic vines, grinned, revealing teeth filed to points. "Excellent choice, Your Highness. This specimen was captured near the outer territories. Strong, intelligent, trained for combat, they say." He lowered his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "And when the collar is loosened, not removed, mind you, just loosened, he can speak. Quite the novelty for entertaining your voice-bearer friends, yes?" That sealed it. Talia smiled, her decision made. The other noble daughters had conventional pets, decorative creatures that chirped or purred or performed simple tricks. But a humanoid who could fight and talk? That would be the envy of every voice court in Antheria. "I'll take him. Have him delivered to my father's estate immediately." As the transaction was completed, Talia noticed the pet watching her intently, not with the cowering deference of the silence who served her family, nor with the vacant stare of most market-traded creatures. No, there was calculation in those unusual eyes, intelligence, and something else, something that, had Talia been less sheltered, she might have recognized as dangerous. But Talia was a voice-bearer, the daughter of Lord Claris, one of the 7 ruling council members who governed Antheria. And voice-bearers feared nothing, especially not their property. She would learn differently before the night was through. The hover carriage hummed softly as it transported Talia, her guards, and her new acquisition back to the Claris estate. The massive property stood on the highest plateau of the capital city, towers of twisting silver and glass that caught the light of Antheria's twin moons. Below, in the shadow of these grand structures, lay the lower docks, where the silence lived in cramped conditions, their voices as suppressed as their hopes. Talia had never given much thought to the silence. They were simply there, serving, working, existing in the background of her privileged life. Voice-bearers spoke, silence listened and obeyed. That was the natural order, had been for generations, since the establishment of the High Council's rule. "We're approaching the southern gate, Your Highness," Commander Vex announced, interrupting her thoughts. Talia nodded, then glanced at her new pet, who sat perfectly still, hands bound before him, eyes forward. In the dim light of the carriage, she could better appreciate his features. Sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, skin the color of burnished bronze. His dark hair was cropped short, practical rather than stylish. He wore simple garments, a fitted black tunic and pants that had clearly seen better days. "Do you have a name?" she asked, realizing she hadn't bothered to inquire at the market. The man didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge her question. Of course, the voice collar. With a sigh, Talia reached forward, activating the small control panel on the side of the metallic band. She wouldn't remove it. Even she wasn't that reckless, but she could loosen the restrictions temporarily. The collar emitted a soft beep, its lights shifting from red to amber. "Now," she said, sitting back, "your name?" For a long moment, he remained silent, and Talia wondered if the merchant had lied about his ability to speak. Then, in a voice that was surprisingly deep and clear, with an accent she couldn't place, he said, "I have had many names. Choose whichever pleases you, Princess." Commander Vex stiffened, his hand moving to his sidearm. "Mind your tone when addressing Her Highness," he warned. The pet's eyes, those strange metallic eyes, shifted to the commander, then back to Talia. There was no fear in them, only measured assessment. I meant no disrespect, he said evenly. I simply understand my position. I am property now, am I not? Property to be named at your discretion. Something in his phrasing, in the careful way he articulated each word, gave Talia pause. This was no ordinary captive. The merchant had mentioned intelligence, but this man spoke like someone educated, like a voice bearer. Before she could respond, the carriage lurched violently. A warning siren blared, and Commander Vex was instantly alert, communicating through his neural implant with the driver. Security breach, he announced, his expression grim. We need to get you to safety, Your Highness. The carriage door slid open, and 2 guards rushed in to escort Talia out. In the confusion, no one noticed the pet's hands were no longer bound. Not until he moved with startling speed, disarming one guard and using the man's own shock baton against him. The second guard raised his weapon, but the pet was faster, delivering a precise strike that sent the man crumpling to the floor, unconscious but alive. Commander Vex drew his pistol, aiming it directly at the pet's head. Don't move, he ordered, his voice steady despite the unexpected turn of events. Wait, Talia cried out, surprising herself with the urgency in her voice. Don't kill him, he's valuable. The pet, who suddenly seemed anything but, stood facing them both, his posture relaxed yet coiled with potential energy. The voice collar still glowed amber at his throat. I have no intention of harming the princess, he said calmly, but I refuse to be paraded as a pet any longer. I am Axel, rightful heir to the Sanctus dynasty, and I demand the respect due my lineage. The silence that followed his declaration was profound. Commander Vex recovered first, barking out a laugh. The Sanctus dynasty? That bloodline has been extinct for over a century. Your delusions will get you executed, slave. But Talia wasn't laughing. Something about the name Sanctus resonated with her, a half-remembered lesson from her history tutor, perhaps. The dynasty that ruled before the voice-bearers, before the great reform that established the current hierarchy. Take us to the estate, she commanded Vex, eyes still fixed on the man calling himself Axel. And secure him properly this time. My father will want to hear about this. Axel's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. Yes, he agreed softly. I imagine Lord Claris will be very interested indeed. As the carriage resumed its journey, Talia couldn't shake the feeling that she'd acquired far more than an exotic pet. She'd stumbled upon a mystery, one that might shake the very foundations of the world she thought she knew. The Claris estate was in uproar by the time they arrived. Word had spread quickly that the young princess had returned with an unusual acquisition, a humanoid pet that claimed to be royalty. Servants whispered in corners, their eyes downcast, but their ears alert, absorbing every scrap of gossip. Lord Claris himself waited in the grand foyer, his tall frame rigid with disapproval, his silver voice-bearer insignia gleaming against the midnight blue of his formal robes. Talia, he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority that came from generations of privilege. Explain yourself. She lifted her chin, refusing to be cowed. Father, I've chosen my name day gift. This is, I know what it is, Lord Claris interrupted. A security risk. Commander Vex has informed me of the incident in the carriage. His cold eyes swept over Axel, who stood between 2 guards, freshly bound with energy restraints. Take it to the holding cells until I decide what to do with it. Father, Talia protested. He's my property. I paid for him with my own credits. Credits I provided, Lord Claris countered. And you brought danger into our home. This creature claims to be Sanctus royalty. Do you have any idea what that means? Before Talia could respond, Axel spoke, his voice steady despite the collar that had been tightened once more. It means that your entire system is built on lies, Lord Claris. The voice bearers didn't save Antheria. They conquered it. They silenced its people. The room fell deathly quiet. Even the servants froze, eyes wide at the audacity of such statements. Lord Claris's face darkened with fury. How dare you speak without permission? He hissed, activating his wrist console. Instantly, the collar around Axel's neck pulsed red, and he fell to his knees, a grimace of pain flashing across his features before he mastered it. "Father, stop!" Talia cried out, rushing forward. Surprisingly, Lord Claris relented, deactivating the punishment circuit. "You see how dangerous this one is? Already turning you against your own family." He shook his head. "He goes to the cells. Tomorrow, I'll summon the council to decide how to proceed." As Axel was dragged away, his eyes met Talia's. In them, she saw neither defeat nor supplication, only determination, burning like banked embers waiting for the right moment to flare. "This isn't over," she whispered to herself, watching as he disappeared down the corridor that led to the estate's lower levels. And indeed, it was only beginning. Against her father's express orders, Talia visited the holding cells later that night. She used her family access codes to bypass security, dismissing the single guard with a fabricated message from Lord Claris. Axel was being held in a high-security chamber. Overkill for a mere pet, further evidence that her father took his claims seriously. When she entered, he was sitting cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed in what appeared to be meditation. The voice collar still encircled his throat, its lights dimmed to a faint glow. "I knew you would come," he said without opening his eyes. "Curiosity is both a strength and a weakness of your kind." "My kind," Talia repeated, bristling. "You mean voice-bearers?" Now his eyes opened, fixing her with that unsettling metallic gaze. "I mean those who have never questioned the world they were born into." She crossed her arms defensively. "I'm not here for philosophy lessons for my pet." "Then why are you here, princess?" He rose to his feet in one fluid motion. Even in captivity, there was a regal quality to his movements that lent credence to his outlandish claims. Talia hesitated. Why had she come? To satisfy her curiosity, certainly. But there was something else, a gnawing doubt that had taken root the moment he'd mentioned the Sanctus dynasty. "Tell me about Sanctus," she finally said. "The real history, not what's in our official records." A spark of approval lit his eyes. "The official records," he echoed. "Carefully curated by the High Council, I imagine." He approached the energy barrier that separated them, close enough that she could see the fine lines around his eyes, evidence that he was older than she'd initially thought. For 5 centuries, the Sanctus dynasty ruled Antheria with a principle called the equality of voice. All citizens, regardless of birth or station, had the right to speak, to be heard, to participate in governance. Science, art, philosophy flourished. We were a beacon among the star systems. Talia frowned. That's not what the histories say. Before the voice-bearers established order, Antheria was in chaos. Too many voices, no direction. The resonance crisis nearly destroyed our civilization. The resonance crisis, Axel said softly, was engineered by those who would become your voice-bearers. A manufactured catastrophe to justify seizing control. It was absurd. Conspiracy theories from a desperate captive. And yet, something in his conviction made her hesitate. "Prove it," she challenged. Axel's expression became contemplative. "There's proof, princess. In this very estate, the Claris family was among the first to support the rebellion against Sanctus. Your ancestors were rewarded with positions on the High Council, with treasures from the royal vaults." He leaned closer to the barrier, lowering his voice. "Including artifacts that would reveal the truth. You're suggesting my father is purposely hiding historical evidence. I'm suggesting that if you look in the right places, perhaps the restricted archives in the East Wing, you might find things that contradict what you've been taught." Talia took an involuntary step back. How did he know about the private archives? That section of the estate was off-limits to all but Lord Claris himself and his most trusted advisors. "You seem to know a great deal about my home," she said, suspicion creeping into her voice. Axel's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. "I've spent years preparing for this moment, princess. Knowledge is the one weapon they couldn't take from me." Before she could respond, the cell's entry panel chimed, indicating someone was overriding the lock. Talia spun around, heart racing. "Go," Axel urged. "If they find you here, questioning the established order, even you won't be protected by your status." She hesitated only a second before moving to a shadowed corner of the room. From there, she activated her personal cloaking device, a luxury item meant for avoiding unwanted social interactions at voice court functions. Not for spying, but it would serve. The door slid open to reveal not guards, but a senior house servant named Alara. The older woman glanced around nervously, then approached the cell. "My lord," she whispered, bowing her head deeply, a gesture of profound respect never shown to mere pets. "We received word of your capture. The underground is mobilizing." Talia had to stifle a gasp. Alara had been with the family for decades, always the model of silent obedience. Yet here she was, addressing this stranger with reverence. "Tell them to wait," Axel instructed, his voice urgent but gentle. "The time isn't right. We need the sacred charter." Alara nodded. "And the princess? Can she be trusted?" Axel's eyes drifted to the corner where Talia stood concealed. Though she was certain her cloaking was active, somehow he seemed to know exactly where she was. "She will make her own choices," he said, "as is her right." After Alara departed, Talia deactivated her cloak, her mind reeling from what she'd witnessed. "Your servant is part of some resistance movement?" she demanded, advancing on the cell. Axel regarded her steadily. "Not my servant, princess. All silents are their own people, though your kind has tried to convince them otherwise." He tilted his head slightly. "But yes, there's always been resistance. Whispers of the old ways, passed down through generations, waiting for the right moment. And you believe that moment is now? With you as the figurehead, with me as the rightful heir," he corrected. "But I cannot do it alone. I need allies who can access places I cannot, who can find the sacred charter." Talia laughed bitterly. "And you think that ally is me, the daughter of a high council member? I will be betraying my family, my entire social order." "Perhaps," Axel conceded. "Or perhaps you would be helping restore what was taken from all of Antheria, including those born into privilege." His gaze was steady, challenging. "Are you satisfied with a world where your voice matters only because others have been silenced?" The question struck deeper than Talia cared to admit. She'd never considered her privilege as something built on others' oppression. The silence were just silence. It was their natural state, or so she'd been taught. "I need time to think," she said finally, backing toward the door. "Time is precious, princess," Axel warned. "Your father has already summoned the council. Once they arrive, my fate and the fate of any potential uprising will be sealed." Talia paused at the threshold. "I'll return tomorrow," she said, uncertain if it was a promise or a threat. As the door sealed behind her, she was left with an uncomfortable truth. In just one day, her perfectly ordered world had begun to unravel, and deep down, a part of her welcomed it. The private archives in the east wing of the Claris estate were housed behind a biometric security system keyed to Lord Claris's DNA signature. Under normal circumstances, Talia would never have been able to gain entry. But these were not normal circumstances. She'd spent the morning observing her father, noting how distracted he was by the impending council meeting. When he set down his governance tablet to answer a priority communication, she'd moved swiftly, pressing her specially prepared patch against the screen surface. The nanobots in the patch copied the residual oils from his fingertips. Not a perfect solution, but enough to fool the basic security. Now, heart pounding, Talia stood in a room she'd been forbidden to enter her entire life. The archives were surprisingly austere compared to the opulence of the rest of the estate. Simple data terminals, holographic projection units, and climate-controlled display cases containing physical artifacts. "Where to begin?" she muttered, approaching the nearest terminal. The database was vast, but Axel had given her specific search parameters. She entered Sanctus Dynasty and Voice Reform as her initial queries, preparing for hours of careful research. To her surprise, the system immediately flagged the search terms as restricted. "Access denied," the terminal announced. "Level Alpha clearance required." Talia frowned. Level Alpha was reserved exclusively for High Council members. What information about the Sanctus Dynasty would require such stringent protection? She tried several more general historical queries, all with the same result. Frustrated, she turned her attention to the physical artifacts. Unlike the digital archives, these were merely secured, not content restricted. The display cases contained an eclectic assortment of items: ceremonial weapons, ancient data crystals, garments made from materials no longer produced in Antheria. Each bore a small identification tag with minimal information: date of acquisition, general category, preservation requirements. One case near the back wall caught her attention. Unlike the others, it was obscured by an opaque force field, completely hiding its contents from view. The control panel indicated it required a voice authorization as well as biometric confirmation. Of course, the one thing I can't access would be the most intriguing, Talia muttered. She was about to move on when she noticed something odd about the flooring around the case. Signs of frequent access, were patterns that suggested this particular artifact was regularly viewed or handled. On impulse, she activated her wrist console and ran a deep scan of the area. The results made her breath catch. The case was emitting a faint energy signature, one that didn't match any standard power source used in Antheria. More importantly, it was actively transmitting data, sending tiny pulses of information to somewhere. Talia's mind raced. What could be so important that it required this level of security, yet remained actively connected to an external system? She needed to know more, but that would require getting Axel out of the holding cell, a considerably more challenging task than breaking into the archives. As she carefully exited the restricted wing, a plan began to form. It would be risky, would likely constitute treason, but the questions burning in her mind demanded answers. If Axel was lying, she'd simply return him to confinement. But if he was telling the truth, the implications were too staggering to contemplate. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she nearly collided with Lady Myrina, a fellow voice-bearer and occasional confidant, as she rounded a corner. "Talia!" Myrina exclaimed, her perfectly composed features registering surprise. "I was just looking for you. Your father mentioned you'd acquired quite the unusual pet yesterday." Talia forced a smile, trying to appear casual. "News travels fast. Among our circle? Always." Myrina linked her arm through Talia's, steering her toward the garden courtyard where they could speak privately. "Is it true? A humanoid that claims royal lineage?" "Merely an entertaining novelty," Talia replied, keeping her tone light. "You know how these market specimens are, full of grand illusions to increase their value." Myrina raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Yet I hear your father has called an emergency council meeting. Seems excessive for a delusional pet." The observation was too pointed to ignore. Myrina had always been perceptive, perhaps dangerously so. "Father worries about everything," Talia said dismissively, "especially when it comes to my choices." They reached the courtyard, a lush oasis of genetically modified flora from across the star systems. Water features created a constant ambient sound that made electronic surveillance difficult. One reason Talia had always enjoyed their conversations here. "Well," Myrina said, releasing Talia's arm to examine a luminescent flower. "Delusional or not, I'd love to meet this specimen. Perhaps at your name day celebration tomorrow." Talia hesitated. She'd almost forgotten about the elaborate party planned in her honor, an event that would bring every significant voice-bearer family to the Clares estate. "I'm not sure that would be appropriate," she hedged. "Father has him confined until the council determines what to do." Myrina's expression remained pleasant, but her eyes sharpened with interest. How curious. Since when does the High Council concern itself with the ownership of pets? She plucked the glowing blossom, twirling it between her fingers. Unless, of course, there's some validity to his claims. Warning bells sounded in Talia's mind. Myrina was probing, testing for reactions. But why? Was it simple curiosity or something more calculated? "I really wouldn't know," Talia said carefully. "I'm not privy to council matters." "No." Myrina's smile was knowing. "Yet you were exiting the restricted archives just now, a section of your home that houses some of the council's most sensitive historical data." Talia felt a chill despite the courtyard's warmth. I was looking for my father. I must have taken a wrong turn. Of course. Myrina's tone made it clear she didn't believe a word. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. You're not the only one with questions about our history, Talia. Some of us have been seeking answers for years. I don't know what you mean, Talia replied stiffly. Don't you? Myrina's gaze was penetrating. The voice-bearer system has served some of us well, but at what cost? There are those among our generation who wonder if perpetuating the silence is truly the path to Antheria's continued prosperity. Talia stared at her, uncertain whether this was a trap or a genuine confidence. Myrina had always been ambitious, her family among the most powerful voice-bearers. If this was some plot to expose disloyalty, as if sensing her suspicion, Myrina stepped back, her demeanor shifting to the carefully cultivated detachment common among their social circle. Just something to consider, she said lightly. Now, I should find your father. My own family has matters to discuss before tomorrow's council session. She departed with the practiced grace of a lifelong voice court member, leaving Talia rooted in place, mind churning with new possibilities. Could Myrina be trusted? Was she part of some reformist movement among the younger voice-bearers? Or was this an elaborate test of Talia's loyalty? One thing was becoming increasingly clear. The arrival of Axel had created ripples that extended far beyond Talia's initial desire for an exotic pet. And now she had to navigate these treacherous waters while determining where her own loyalties truly lay. That night, the Claris estate buzzed with activity as the first council members arrived for the emergency session. Security was heightened, with additional guards stationed throughout the property and surveillance drones patrolling the perimeter. Perfect conditions for what Talia had planned. She'd spent the afternoon carefully preparing, gathering supplies, and studying the holding cell security protocols. The challenge wasn't gaining access. Her family codes would handle that, but rather extracting Axel without triggering alarms that would bring the entire security force down on them. The solution came from an unexpected source: her name day preparations. The massive delivery of decorations, food, and entertainment equipment provided ideal cover for smuggling one person out of the secure wing. At precisely midnight, when the shift change occurred, Talia put her plan into motion. Dressed in the simple gray uniform of estate staff, she approached the holding area, pushing a hover cart loaded with elaborate floral arrangements. Delivery for the East Salon, she told the guard, keeping her head slightly bowed as a silent would. The guard barely glanced at her, more concerned with the incoming staff taking over his post. You got the wrong section. East Salon is 2 levels up. My apologies, Talia murmured, turning the cart as if to leave. As the guard's attention returned to the shift change, she discreetly activated her wrist console. The lights flickered momentarily, the result of a small electromagnetic pulse localized to this section. In the 3 seconds of confusion that followed, she slipped past the checkpoint, using her access code to enter the detention area. Axel was awake, as if he'd been expecting her. His eyes widened slightly at her disguise. Princess, he acknowledged quietly. You've made your decision. I've decided I want answers, she corrected, deactivating the cell barrier. This isn't a jailbreak. It's a temporary field trip. We're going to the archives, and you're going to show me exactly what you claim is there. He nodded, stepping out of the cell with careful movements. The collar. Talia hesitated, then activated the control function, switching it from red to amber, enough to allow speech but maintaining some restrictions. This is as far as my trust extends for now, she warned. Axel inclined his head in acceptance. It's enough. Now, how do we get past the guards? Talia gestured to the hover cart. The bottom compartment. It's tight, but it should work. Minutes later, they were moving smoothly through the estate's service corridors, Axel concealed in the cart, while Talia navigated with the confidence of someone who belonged exactly where she was. They encountered few staff. Most had been reassigned to prepare for the next day's events. When they reached the archives, Talia used the same nanopatch technique to bypass the initial security. Once inside, she locked the door and allowed Axel to emerge from his cramped hiding place. You're resourceful, he commented, stretching his limbs. A trait of your bloodline, though usually applied to less noble pursuits. Talia ignored the jab. We don't have much time. Show me what's so important that my father would keep it at the highest security level. Axel surveyed the room, his strange eyes seeming to catalog every detail. When he spotted the opaque case at the back, he moved toward it with purpose. There, he said softly, the sacred charter. Talia followed, frowning. That requires voice authorization. We can't access it. Axel turned to her, his expression solemn. We can't, but perhaps you can. He gestured to the control panel. The voice pattern it's looking for belongs to Lord Claris. Yes? Of course. And you're his daughter. Your vocal patterns share certain genetic markers. Understanding dawned. You think I could fool it? Not entirely, Axel admitted. But coupled with the biometric data you've already collected, it might create enough of a match to lower defenses. It was a long shot, but they had few options. Talia approached the panel, placing her nanopatch on the scanner while clearing her throat. Access artifact case Alpha Sanctus one, she said, pitching her voice as low as possible, trying to mimic her father's formal cadence. The system hummed, processing. Red error flashed once, then twice, then partial match detected, the computer announced. Secondary verification required. Please state the Dynasty Fall authorization code. Talia looked at Axel helplessly. I don't know any authorization code. His expression darkened. But I do. It would be the date of the Sanctus overthrow, formatted in the old calendar. He closed his eyes briefly, then said, Try Resonance Horizon 593. With nothing to lose, Talia repeated the code. A tense moment passed, then the force field around the case dissipated, revealing its contents. A crystalline object approximately the size of a human heart, pulsing with inner light that shifted between deep blue and violet. The sacred charter, Axel breathed, reverence evident in his voice. The physical embodiment of the covenant between the Sanctus rulers and the people of Antheria. Talia stared at the object, mesmerized by its gentle pulsations. It's beautiful, but what does it do? It contains the original constitutional principles of Antheria, encoded at the quantum level. But more importantly, Axel reached toward the case, stopping just short of the additional barrier that protected the artifact. It's keyed to Sanctus DNA. When activated by a true heir, it broadcasts those principles across all communication networks. That's why it's still transmitting data, Talia realized. My father keeps it active but contained, monitoring for any attempt to access it. Precisely. Axel turned to her, his expression intense. The voice bearers fear it because they know what would happen if the charter were activated. The truth would be undeniable, irrefutable. The historical records locked in this very archive would be automatically decrypted and made public. Talia's mind raced with implications. You need me to help you steal it. Not steal, restore, Axel corrected. Return it to its rightful purpose. Before she could respond, an alarm blared throughout the estate. Not the security breach alarm she'd feared, but a general alert. What's happening? Axel asked sharply. Talia checked her wrist console, her blood freezing as she read the notification. The council meeting has been moved up. They're convening now, in the middle of the night. She looked up at him, realization dawning. My father knows. Somehow, he knows we're here. Axel's expression hardened with resolve. Then we're out of time. We need to take the charter now. And go where? Talia demanded. The entire estate will be locked down. To the lower docks, he said firmly. There are people waiting, people who have been preparing for this moment for generations. The weight of the decision pressed on Talia. Taking the sacred charter would be an irrevocable step, not just breaking rules, but actively opposing everything her family stood for. Yet standing here, faced with tangible evidence that her society was built on suppressed history, could she simply walk away? Return to her privileged existence, pretending she didn't know? The alarm continued its persistent warning. Soon, security would perform a sweep of all restricted areas. Talia made her choice. Stand back, she instructed, approaching the case. Rather than attempting to deactivate the final barrier through the control panel, she removed a small device from her pocket, an override tool she'd taken from her father's security suite. This will trigger multiple alerts, she warned, placing the device against the case's security mechanism. Then we'll need to move quickly, Axel replied, tension evident in his stance. The override tool flashed once, twice, then emitted a high-pitched whine as it forced the barrier to collapse. Instantly, new alarms joined the first, these more urgent, more demanding. Axel moved forward, hands reaching for the sacred charter with reverent determination. As his fingers closed around the crystalline object, it flared brilliantly, its pulsing light accelerating, growing stronger. "It recognizes you," Talia whispered, awed despite herself. Axel nodded, a complex emotion crossing his features, vindication, perhaps, mixed with the heavy burden of responsibility. He carefully placed the charter in a containment pouch Talia had brought, designed to block energy signatures. "Now we run," he said simply. They barely made it back to the service corridor before the first security team rushed past, heading for the archives. Talia led them through rarely used passages, legacy of an estate built over generations, with forgotten spaces between walls and beneath floors. They had nearly reached the lower exit when they encountered Commander Vex, flanked by 4 elite guards. "Princess Talia," Vex said, his expression a mixture of disappointment and determination. "Step away from the prisoner and return the stolen artifact." Talia felt Axel tense beside her, ready for confrontation. But violence would only confirm everything the voice-bearers believed about the dangerous nature of allowing silence to speak freely. "Commander," she said, adopting the authoritative tone she'd heard her father use countless times, "I'm conducting an authorized investigation into this specimen's claims, on my father's orders. The security protocols triggered automatically when we removed the artifact for examination." Vex's expression flickered with uncertainty. "Lord Claris mentioned no such investigation to me. And would he share every detail of council business with security personnel?" Talia countered, gambling on Vex's pride. "This matter requires discretion at the highest level." It was a tenuous lie, one that would collapse the moment Vex consulted with Lord Claris. But it might buy them precious seconds. The commander hesitated, his training to obey voice-bearers warring with his instinct that something was wrong. That moment of indecision was all Axel needed. Moving with practiced precision, he struck, not at Vex, but at the corridor's environmental controls. The sudden blast of steam from ruptured pipes filled the passageway with blinding fog. "Run!" Axel shouted, grabbing Talia's hand. They sprinted through the billowing steam, using the disorientation to slip past the guards. Behind them, Vex's shouted commands competed with the wail of alarms. Talia led them down, always down, through increasingly neglected corridors until they reached a maintenance exit that opened onto the lower service rings of the estate. From here, it was a straight path to the boundary walls, and beyond them, the sprawling chaos of the lower docks. "We'll never make it through the main gates," Talia gasped, her breath coming in short bursts. The reality of what she'd done, betraying her father, her caste, everything she'd been raised to uphold, was beginning to sink in. "We don't need to," Axel replied, guiding her toward what appeared to be a solid wall. He pressed his hand against a specific panel, and to Talia's shock, a section slid open, revealing a narrow tunnel. "How did you?" "The silence had been preparing for generations," he explained, ushering her inside. "Every voice-bearer estate has escape routes built by the very people they oppress. Ironic, isn't it? The tunnel was cramped and dark, forcing them to move in single file. Talia could hear the pursuit behind them, growing more distant as the passageway twisted beneath the estate's foundations. After what seemed like hours, but was likely only minutes, they emerged into the humid night air of the lower docks. The contrast between this world and the one Talia had just fled couldn't have been more stark. Where the voice-bearer estates were meticulously designed with sweeping architecture and controlled environments, the lower docks were a haphazard collection of structures built from salvage materials, stacked upon one another in dense configurations that defied conventional planning. The air was thick with the scent of food stalls, industrial emissions, and too many bodies in too little space. Neon signs in multiple languages advertised everything from repair services to illicit pleasures. The constant drone of voices, kept to whispers and murmurs in deference to the law, created a background hum that was both foreign and intimidating to Talia. "Stay close," Axel murmured, positioning himself slightly ahead of her. He'd adopted a different posture, hunched and submissive, the stance of a silent accompanying his voice-bearer owner. "And keep your hood up. Your voice insignia will draw attention we don't want." Talia pulled the hood of her disguise lower, acutely aware of the silver pin on her collar that marked her caste. She should have removed it, but the thought hadn't occurred to her. Such was the ingrained nature of her privilege. As they navigated the crowded streets, Talia noticed how people reacted to Axel. Subtle nods, averted eyes that nevertheless tracked their movement, the occasional hand sign exchanged too quickly for her to interpret. "They know you," she whispered. "They know what I represent," he corrected. "Hope is a powerful thing, princess. It survives even in the most oppressive conditions." They turned down a series of increasingly narrow alleys, moving deeper into the labyrinthine heart of the lower docks. Finally, Axel led her to a nondescript doorway marked only with a faded symbol that resembled the sacred charter's crystalline form. He knocked in a specific pattern, and the door opened to reveal an elderly woman, her face a map of lines that spoke of a hard life. "You've returned," she said, her voice barely audible. Her eyes widened when she saw Talia. "With a voice-bearer." "She helped me retrieve the charter," Axel explained. "She's chosen to stand with us." The woman's skeptical gaze swept over Talia, lingering on the silver insignia. Has she, or is she playing both sides, like the Lady Myrina? Talia stiffened. "What about Lady Myrina?" A grim expression crossed Axel's face. "She presents herself as a reformer to gain the trust of those who question the system, but she reports directly to the High Council. She's one of their most effective intelligence assets." The revelation hit Talia like a physical blow. Myrina, who had approached her in the garden with talk of questioning the status quo, it had been a test, a trap. "My father knows," she realized aloud. "Myrina was probing me earlier today, and I didn't see it." "All the more reason to move quickly," the elderly woman said, ushering them inside and securing the door behind them. The interior belied the building's humble exterior. What looked like a cramped dwelling from outside opened into a substantial underground complex, a hidden refuge equipped with advanced technology that rivaled anything in the voice-bearer estates. "Welcome to the sanctuary," Axel said, as Talia took in her surroundings with undisguised wonder. The main chamber buzzed with activity. Dozens of silents worked at communication stations, monitoring feeds, analyzing data. On the walls, holographic displays showed different sectors of the city, including, to Talia's shock, live surveillance of the Claris estate. "How are you accessing those feeds?" she asked. "They're supposed to be encrypted at the highest level." A young man looked up from his workstation, a hint of pride in his otherwise serious expression. "Voice bearers design the systems, but silence maintain them. We've had access to your surveillance network for years." "Indeed," Axel said, placing a hand on Talia's shoulder. "The High Council believes they control the flow of information, but there are always cracks in the dam." He led her to a circular table at the center of the room, where several older silents had gathered. He removed the sacred charter from its containment pouch and placed it reverently in the center. The crystalline object seemed to pulse stronger here, as if responding to the presence of so many who believed in what it represented. "For generations, we've prepared for this moment," Axel told the assembled group. "The charter has been returned to its people. Now we must take the next step, broadcasting the truth to all of Antheria." "How?" Talia asked. "Even with the charter, you can't simply override every communication channel." One of the older men, his white hair contrasting sharply with his dark skin, stepped forward. "That's where you're wrong, voice bearer. The charter was designed as the ultimate failsafe against tyranny. When activated by a true sanctus heir, it can access the central transmission array, the very heart of Antheria's communication network. The array is in the High Council building, Talia protested. It's the most heavily guarded facility on the planet. And yet, the elderly woman who had admitted them said, it has one vulnerability. The original designers, true believers in the Sanctus principles, built a direct access point beneath the foundation. It was sealed during the voice-bearer takeover, but not destroyed. We've spent decades pinpointing its exact location, the white-haired man added. And now, with the charter to guide us, we can reactivate it. Talia looked at the faces around her. People who had lived their entire lives under oppression, yet had never abandoned hope. They had built this hidden resistance, maintained their knowledge of the past, and waited for the right moment to reclaim their voices. It was humbling, and more than a little shaming, to realize how completely she had accepted the narrative fed to her since birth. What happens after the broadcast? She asked. Do you truly believe the voice bearers will simply surrender their power because of some historical revelation? No, Axel admitted, his expression grave. We expect resistance, possibly violence. But once the truth is known, many will question the system they've supported. The charter doesn't just contain historical records. It holds proof of deliberate genetic manipulation of how the voice bearers altered themselves to monopolize communication. Talia's mind reeled. Genetic manipulation? What are you saying? The voice collars aren't just tools of oppression. Princess, he explained gently. They're necessary counterbalances to the modifications the first voice bearers made to their own vocal structures. Modifications that allow your words to command attention, to override the natural thought patterns of listeners. It's subtle, almost subliminal, but very real. She shook her head in disbelief. That's impossible. I would know if my voice had some kind of power. Would you? Axel challenged. Or would it simply seem natural that people listen when you speak, that they rush to fulfill your every request, that no silent would dare interrupt or contradict you? The implications were too enormous to process fully. If Axel was right, then everything, her entire identity, the social structure she'd taken for granted, was based on a biological coup. Before she could respond, alarms blared throughout the complex. The holographic displays shifted to show voice-bearer security forces converging on the lower docks, led by none other than Lord Claris himself. They've found us, the white-haired man announced grimly. And they're using wide-spectrum scanners. They'll locate the charter's energy signature within minutes. Axel's decision was immediate. We move now. The access point beneath the council building is our only chance. That's suicide, Talia argued. You'll never get past the perimeter, let alone reach the array. We have people inside, the elderly woman revealed. Silence who serve in the council chambers. They've been waiting for this signal. She touched a pendant at her throat, which emitted a soft pulse in response to her fingerprint. You still need a distraction, Talia said, an idea forming. Something significant enough to draw attention away from your true objective. She straightened a lifetime of voice-bearer confidence asserting itself. You need me. Axel studied her intently. What are you suggesting? I'll surrender myself, she explained. The daughter of Lord Claris, returning to face justice for her treasonous actions. Every security officer will be focused on securing me and learning what I know. They'll interrogate you, one of the resistance members warned. Voice-bearers don't show mercy, even to their own. I know my father, Talia replied, with more confidence than she felt. He won't risk the political implications of torturing his own daughter publicly. He'll try to reason with me first to understand my motivations. That will buy you time. Axel's expression was unreadable. Why would you do this? A day ago, you considered me property. Now you'd risk everything for our cause. Talia met his gaze steadily. Not for your cause, she corrected. For the truth. If what you've shown me is real, then I've been complicit in a system built on lies. I need to make that right. A moment of silence followed her declaration, broken only by the continuing alarms. Very well, Axel finally said. But you'll need something to make your surrender believable, something they'll think you're trading for leniency. He reached for the sacred charter, but instead of handling it directly, He extracted a small shard that had been loose in the crystalline structure. Tell them you stole this fragment, but that the main charter remains with the Resistance. It contains enough data to be convincing, but not enough to compromise our mission. Talia accepted the shard, tucking it securely into an inner pocket. How long do you need? 2 hours, the white-haired technician calculated, to reach the access point and configure the broadcast. Then you'll have 2 hours, she promised. Axel took her hands in his, and for the first time, Talia noticed they were the same height, eye to eye. Without the constructed hierarchy between them, they were simply two people fighting for what they believed was right. Be careful, princess, he said softly. Your voice may command, but so does your example. Remember that. With a final nod to the resistance leaders, Talia turned and left the sanctuary, stepping back into the chaotic streets of the lower docks. Only now, she moved with purpose toward the approaching security forces, toward her father, toward a confrontation that would either doom Antheria to continued oppression or help forge a new path toward equality. She had been raised to believe in her inherent superiority, in her right to speak while others remained silent. Now, she would use that voice for something that actually mattered. The security checkpoint at the edge of the lower docks was in chaos when Talia arrived. Voice-bearer forces were conducting aggressive sweeps, requiring identification from everyone passing through, and using scanner wants to check for unauthorized technology. Silents were being detained and holding pins for additional questioning, their expressions a mixture of fear and simmering resentment. Talia approached confidently, lowering her hood to reveal her face and the telltale silver insignia of her caste. I am Princess Talia of House Claris, she announced, her voice carrying over the noise of the checkpoint. I wish to surrender myself to my father, Lord Claris. The effect was immediate. Guards snapped to attention. Officers rushed forward. Communications flared as her presence was reported up the chain of command. Secure her, ordered the ranking officer, though his tone was uncertain. No one was quite prepared for the protocol of arresting a voice-bearer of Talia's stature. As restraints were applied to her wrists, loosely, she noted, with deference to her status even now, she caught glimpses of movement in her peripheral vision. Silence melting away from the checkpoint, using her distraction to slip past the security cordon. The resistance was already utilizing her surrender. She was escorted to an armored transport, where Commander Vex awaited, his expression a storm of conflicting emotions. Princess, he said stiffly, your father has instructed me to bring you directly to the council chamber. I expected nothing less, she replied, stepping into the transport with as much dignity as her restraints allowed. The journey to the central district was conducted in tense silence. Talia could feel Vex's gaze on her, questioning, perhaps even concerned. He had served her family for years, had watched her grow from a child into the young woman she was now. Her apparent betrayal must have been difficult for him to reconcile. Why? He finally asked, as the transport entered the secure perimeter of the High Council complex. You had everything. Why risk it all for a fabricated claim by a market slave? Talia met his gaze evenly. What if it's not fabricated, Commander? What if everything we've been taught about our history is a carefully constructed lie? Vex's expression hardened. I've sworn an oath to protect the voice-bearer legacy. I won't be swayed by treasonous speculation, not even if presented with irrefutable evidence. She shifted slightly, allowing the outline of the charter shard to become visible through her clothing. His eyes widened in recognition. Every security officer was briefed on the significance of the sacred charter. Not its true purpose, of course, but its classification as a dangerous artifact that could destabilize Antheria if misused. You have a fragment, he realized aloud. That's why you're surrendering, to trade it for leniency. Talia smiled enigmatically, neither confirming nor denying his assumption. Let him believe what he needed to. It only strengthened her cover story. The transport docked at the private entrance to the council building, a towering structure of gleaming metal and prismatic glass that dominated the central plaza. Designed to impress and intimidate, it had always represented the pinnacle of voice-bearer authority. Now, looking at it with newly opened eyes, Talia saw it differently, a monument to suppression, built on a foundation of historical revision and genetic manipulation. She was led through corridors of increasing opulence, past security checkpoints where guards stood at rigid attention, until finally they reached the antechamber to the main council hall. Lord Claris was waiting, his tall frame silhouetted against the panoramic windows that offered a commanding view of the city below. He turned as she entered, and the pain in his eyes caught Talia off guard. She had expected anger, even cold calculation, not this raw hurt. "Leave us," he commanded the escort detail. When they hesitated, his voice sharpened. "Now, and deactivate surveillance in this room." Once they were alone, the formidable Lord Claris seemed to age before her eyes, his shoulders slumping just slightly. "My daughter," he said softly, "what have you done?" Against her will, Talia felt a pang of guilt. Whatever else he was, this man had raised her, had shown her affection in his own reserved way. "I discovered the truth," she answered simply. "About the Sanctus dynasty, about the voice-bearer takeover, about the genetic modifications." Lord Claris sighed deeply. "So, the pet convinced you of his delusions. I had hoped your intelligence would protect you from such manipulation." "They're not delusions," Talia countered, holding her ground. "I've seen the evidence. The sacred charter is a dangerous relic of a failed system," he interrupted sharply. "The Sanctus approach to governance nearly destroyed Antheria. Do you think giving voice to every individual, regardless of education or understanding, leads to harmony? It leads to chaos, to the resonance crisis that nearly tore our world apart." "That's the official history," Talia acknowledged. "But the charter tells a different story. The crisis was engineered by those who would become the first voice-bearers, a pretext for seizing control." Lord Claris moved closer, his expression intense. "Even if that were true, and I'm not conceding that it is, consider the generations of peace and prosperity since then. Our system works, Talia. Antheria thrives under structured governance." "Thrives?" Talia echoed incredulously. "Have you seen the lower docks? The conditions the silents live in? That's not prosperity, it's subjugation. It's necessary balance," Lord Claris insisted. "The voice modifications we carry require counterbalances in the general population. Without the collars, without the restrictions, there would be constant neural feedback loops, mind resonance effects that would destabilize society." Talia's eyes narrowed. "So you admit the genetic modifications are real?" Lord Claris hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Yes. The First Council enhanced their vocal capabilities to bring order out of chaos. It was necessary then, and the continuation of that system is necessary now. Or you could simply reverse the modifications," Talia suggested. "Return everyone to a natural state. After 5 generations, the modifications are part of our genome now. And even if it were possible, the transition would be catastrophic." He shook his head. "This is why we protect certain knowledge, Talia. Not out of malice, but because the reality is more complex than idealists like your Axel understand." Talia noted the name. Her father knew exactly who Axel was. "He claims to be the Sanctus heir." "He may well be," Lord Claris admitted, surprising her. "Genetic testing was done while he was in custody. His DNA matches archived samples from the old royal line." This confirmation of Axel's identity sent a jolt through Talia. If her father acknowledged his lineage, then everything else might also be true. "Then you know why I had to help him," she said. "The system is built on a fundamental injustice." Lord Claris's expression hardened again. "The system is built on pragmatism. And now, because of your actions, we face potential civil unrest at best, civil war at worst." He extended his hand. "Give me the charter fragment, Talia. Help me prevent bloodshed." She hesitated. The genuine concern in her father's voice was persuasive. What if he was right? What if exposing the truth all at once would lead to more suffering, not less? But then she remembered the sanctuary, silence, who had built a resistance over generations, maintaining hope despite oppression. They deserve the chance to speak, to be heard. "I can't," she said finally. "Not until the full truth is known. The people should decide what system governs them, with complete information." Disappointment flashed across Lord Claris's features, followed by resignation. Then you leave me no choice. He activated his wrist console. Security returned to the antechamber. Princess Talia is to be escorted to a secure holding facility until the council determines her fate. As the door slid open and guards entered, Talia realized she had successfully occupied her father's attention for nearly an hour. Axel and the Resistance will be making their move toward the array access point even now. She allowed herself to be led away, catching one last glimpse of her father, the powerful Lord Claris, architect of policy, keeper of secrets, standing alone in the antechamber, suddenly looking older and smaller than she had ever seen him. The secure holding facility turned out to be a luxurious suite within the council building itself. A gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless. Talia was provided with every comfort, but the door was locked, the communications disabled, and a guard posted outside. From her window, she could see the sprawling cityscape of Antheria's capital, the sharp division between the gleaming heights of the voice-bearer districts and the industrial haze that hung over the lower docks. The physical manifestation of the division she had taken for granted her entire life. Time passed with excruciating slowness. Had Axel reached the access point? Was the Resistance succeeding in their mission? Or had they been captured, their dream of equality dying before it could truly begin? Just as her appointed 2 hours were nearing completion, the building's emergency systems activated, not the blaring alarm of a security breach, but the softer, pulsing tone that indicated a system-wide communication override. Talia's heart leaped. They had done it. They had reached the array. The large display screen in her suite flickered to life automatically, as did every communication device across Antheria. The sacred charter appeared, rotating slowly, its crystalline structure glowing with inner light. Then Axel's face filled the screen, his voice collar removed, his expression solemn but hopeful. "People of Antheria," he began, his deep voice resonating with natural authority, not the genetic enhancement of the voice-bearers. "I am Axel Sanctus, heir to the dynasty that ruled our world for 5 centuries before the voice-bearer coup. Today, I speak not to reclaim a throne, but to reclaim our shared history, and with it, our shared future." What followed was a methodical presentation of evidence, historical records long suppressed, scientific data on the genetic modifications, testimony from silence who had preserved oral histories through generations of oppression. The broadcast continued uninterrupted, evidence that the Resistance had successfully secured the array against immediate shutdown. Talia found herself holding her breath as Axel reached the conclusion of his address. "I did not ask you to follow me," he said, his gaze seeming to connect with each viewer individually. "I ask only that you listen to your own conscience, now that you know the truth. The Sacred Charter does not demand a return to the past. It offers a path to a more equitable future." The screen shifted to show the charter in its entirety, pulsing with energy as data streamed outward, infiltrating every database, every archive across Antheria. "The information is now available to all," Axel continued. "The decision of what to do with it belongs to each citizen. But know this, from this moment forward, no voice-bearer technology can prevent you from speaking. The Charter's activation has neutralized the suppression frequencies in the collars. Your voice is your own again." As if in answer to this declaration, Talia heard something she had never experienced before, a rising tide of sound from the city below. Thousands, then millions of voices, no longer whispered but spoken aloud, full-throated and free for the first time in generations. The door to her suite slid open, revealing not a guard but Lady Myrina, her perfect composure shattered, her eyes wild with a mixture of fear and excitement. "It's happening," she said, her voice trembling. The silence, their speaking, gathering in the streets. The lower docks have already declared independence from council rule. Talia moved past her to the corridor. The council building was in disarray, staff running in all directions, alarms competing with the continuing broadcast. "My father," she asked. "An emergency session with the remaining council members," Myrina replied. They're trying to formulate a response, but it's too late. The momentum has shifted. Talia made her decision instantly. Take me to them. Myrina hesitated. They won't welcome you. You're seen as a traitor, the one who made this possible. Exactly, Talia said with newfound certainty. Which means I might be the only one who can prevent this transition from becoming bloody. Together, they navigated the chaos of the building, eventually reaching the council chamber itself. The massive doors, normally guarded by ceremonial security, stood unattended. The guards had apparently abandoned their posts in the confusion. Inside, the 7 seats of the High Council were occupied by only 4 members. Lord Claris stood at the center, addressing the others with increasing desperation. We still control the security forces, he was saying as Talia entered. We can contain this uprising until the initial shock passes. Once order is restored, there will be no containing this, Father, Talia interrupted, her voice carrying across the chamber. All heads turned toward her, expressions ranging from shock to outrage. How dare you show your face here? One council member snarled. This disaster is your doing. No, Talia replied calmly. This was inevitable. The truth cannot remain buried forever. Lord Claris's expression was unreadable. What do you want, Talia? To prevent bloodshed, she answered honestly. The silence are organizing, finding their collective voice. If you send security forces against them now, it will only confirm everything the Charter has revealed about voice-bearer rule. So we should simply surrender, another council member demanded. Hand over generations of stability to mob rule. Not surrender, Talia said carefully. Transition. Form a joint governance council with representatives from both voice-bearers and silence. Work together to find technological solutions to the genetic modifications, ways to maintain neural stability without oppression. Lord Claris studied his daughter with new eyes, seeing perhaps for the first time not just the privileged princess, but a young woman with conviction and vision. In your Sanctus heir, he asked quietly, what role does he envision for himself in this new order? Talia met her father's gaze steadily. Ask him yourself. He's here. On cue, the chamber doors opened once more to admit Axel, flanked by the elderly woman from the sanctuary and the white-haired technician. The sacred charter floated before them, suspended in a containment field, yet still radiating gentle pulses of light. The council members recoiled at this intrusion, but Talia noted they made no move to call security, perhaps understanding that the old power dynamics had already shifted irreversibly. Axel approached the council table, his posture neither submissive nor aggressive, but balanced, a leader among equals. High Council members, he acknowledged with a slight bow. Your governance has ended, but that doesn't mean your wisdom and experience cannot still serve Antheria. Bold words from someone who was property days ago. One council member scoffed. And therein lies the problem, Axel replied without rancor. A system that would classify some beings as property while others enjoy unlimited privilege cannot produce justice, no matter how efficiently it operates. He turned to Lord Claris, whose stern demeanor had given way to resigned calculation. You understand the science behind the voice-bearer modifications better than anyone, Axel said. Your research could be invaluable in finding a solution that allows all Antherians to coexist without neural resonance risks. Lord Claris raised an eyebrow, surprised at this diplomatic approach. You're offering cooperation rather than retribution? The Sanctus Way was never about revenge, Axel explained. It was about balance, about ensuring every voice contributed to the greater harmony. He gestured to the charter, still pulsing with its inner light. That wisdom remains encoded here, waiting to guide us again. A tense silence filled the chamber as Lord Claris considered this unexpected olive branch. The fate of Antheria hung in the balance, continued conflict or the beginning of reconciliation. Finally, the voice-bearer patriarch sighed deeply. I have spent my life believing in the necessity of our system. If I am to consider alternatives, I will need guarantees, protections for those who have governed until now. Fair terms can be negotiated, Axel agreed. But the fundamental principle must be equality of voice. No more collars, no more silence. Lord Claris looked to his daughter, something almost like pride flickering in his eyes. You chose your side. Well, Talia, perhaps more wisely than I chose mine all those years ago. It wasn't capitulation, not quite, but it was an opening, a crack in the edifice of voice-bearer supremacy that might, with careful nurturing, widen into a new path forward. That night, as the first tentative steps toward a joint governance council were taken, Talia stood on the balcony of the council building, watching the city below. The air was filled with sound, songs, speeches, the simple joy of people speaking freely for the first time. Axel joined her, the sacred charter safely secured once more, its work of revelation complete. What happens now? Talia asked. Revolution is one thing, but building something new will be infinitely more challenging, Axel finished with a smile, but also infinitely more rewarding. He gazed out at the transformed city, at the bridges of light that now connected the voice-bearer districts to the lower docks, symbolic pathways of communication being established. Your father surprised me, he admitted. I expected more resistance. He's a pragmatist above all, Talia explained, and he loves Antheria in his own way. Once he accepted that change was inevitable, he began calculating how to shape it rather than stop it. Axel nodded thoughtfully. We'll need that pragmatism in the days ahead. The neural effects of voice modification won't disappear overnight. There will be challenges, setbacks. But we'll face them together, Talia said with conviction. Voice bearers and former silence, working as equals. A comfortable silence fell between them, filled with the sounds of liberation from below. After a moment, Talia chuckled softly. What is it? Axel asked. I was just thinking, she said, a hint of irony in her voice. Daughter, you wanted a new pet, but this one fought, and claimed he was the lost heir to a dynasty that would change everything. Axel laughed, the sound genuine and unrestrained. Not quite what you expected when you visited the market that day. Not at all, Talia agreed. She turned to face him fully, her expression growing serious. But exactly what Antheria needed. In the city below, voices continued to rise, not in perfect harmony, not without discord, but with the beautiful complexity of a population finding its way toward a new understanding of itself. The road ahead would be difficult, the transition fraught with challenges, but one fundamental truth had been restored. Every voice mattered. Every voice deserved to be heard. And in that chorus of newly liberated voices, the future of Antheria would be written, not by the privileged few, but by all who called this world their home.